Ali,
Ali.
headspace. Headspace.
I know. I'm trying to figure that out. 1 second.
I just didn't want Nouri to yell at you, so I yell at you first.
Hello, assalamu alaikum, and this is episode number 18, Muslim Representation, Holding Hollywood to Account, with Shaf Choudry of the Riz Test.
It's not new how Muslims have been represented poorly. Now, I think it's always been about a narrative of the other and like otherization.
Shaf Choudry is part of the Riz Test. The Riz Test, named after Riz Ahmed, taking inspiration from Riz Ahmed's 2017 speech in the House of Commons in the UK on diversity on screen. The Riz Test is a sort of litmus test for film, for Muslim representation on film. It is 5 criteria to measure how Muslims are portrayed on film and TV. When the Riz Test first started, they went viral and were featured on news outlets all across the world. Ever since then, they have grown into a movement of holding Hollywood to account for their horrid track record of Muslim representation. We'll be discussing with Shaf today why Muslim representation is so bad, what is the Riz Test and how did it come about, what was the initial reaction to the Riz Test, how far has it come, and how important is Muslim representation in film. How has Muslim representation changed with the introduction of people in the limelight such as Riz Ahmed, Ramy Youssef, Hasan Minhaj, Kumail Nanjiani, and others. We'll also be speaking about positive examples of Muslim representation in film and what Muslim representation really means to us. Thank you for joining us here over at 786 Boulevard. Shaf, assalamu alaikum. Thanks so much for joining me, Hasnain and Ali on this episode. Really appreciate you taking from your time and really appreciate you joining us to talk the Riz Test and Muslim representation on film. Thank you so much. I did want to start by just saying that you are hands down the nicest guest we've ever had, and the reason I say that, not to put the other guests down, but the reason I say that is because I remember we booked you on a few weeks ago, and you know we have this thing where we don't cancel on people. We try to avoid doing that as much as possible. And Hasnain was feeling. Hasnain, you were ill, right? You were ill, or what was the story again?
I was sick.
Yeah, he was very, very ill, and you know.
I sent you a picture. I was at the doctor's getting blood work done.
He sent me a doctor's note, and I then reached out to you and let you know. And Shaf's first response was, "Oh, but is he okay? Please, you know, make dua for him. You know, he's in my duas. Please ask me if he's okay." And I actually screenshotted that and I sent it to Hasnain and I said, "This is Shaf. Be like Shaf. This is a nice guy. Make sure you like him." So, you know,
I'm not a nice guy. That's why he said that to me.
Hasnain needs to learn how to be a nice guy. But again, it's wonderful to have you on, and you know, Riz Test do some fantastic work. You know, we've connected in the past and spoken about in the past, so I'm really excited to explore it. I just wanted to start off by asking all of you guys, what is the worst example of Muslim representation for you on film? And I know there's many choices to you know, so we're sport for choice here. Shaf, I'll go with you. If you were to pick one film which is for you the worst example of Muslim representation, what would you pick and why?
Oh gosh, well, first of all, wa alaikum salam, and absolute pleasure to be here, and you know, thank you for having me. And so if I was to answer that question, I think it wouldn't be a film, but one show that I come back to time and again is BBC Bodyguard.
Oh my god, yeah.
I was gonna say that. Damn
it. It's by far one of the worst. Don't get me wrong, it's not the worst. It's one of the worst, most gratuitous examples of you know, the way that Muslims are portrayed, and I think it's not just the show itself, it's the syndication of it. It went out everywhere, and it was loaded with awards, and it was spoken about as this amazing show, which we had the highest number of viewers in like TV history, etc., etc. So that's why it compounds the effect for me.
I think the biggest you know, what's most upsetting about something like The Bodyguard is that it's a recent show. It's not something, you know, like 10, 20 years old. You know, now, especially during this whole movement of, you know, of fighting for positive representation of all minorities, and, you know, representation of women and equal pay and, you know, all these movements that are going on. Within that same sphere, you still have the show came out, which is as Islamophobic as that show, which I remember I think the creators even tried to defend. if I'm not mistaken. Hasnain.
I mean, Hasan Minhaj said something about it. He was open about it, about how Islamophobic it was. And then I think the director, the writer, kind of rebutted, saying you should watch the thing before judging it, something like that.
But that's the thing. Like they'll portray something really bad, and they'll be like, no, but you don't understand what we were trying to achieve by showing it. You know, and it's just like, well, ultimately the people that are consuming it aren't as smart as you. So you know, we need to kind of remember that. Hasnain, what's your example of the worst?
I mean, he took my answer, but I think obviously I can't think back far, so I'll pick something recent. But I always go back to maybe American Sniper.
Yeah, that was my answer.
Yeah. All right. So my bad. So figure out something else.
It's like dominoes here. Yeah, but I think American Sniper. I mean, I've got a lot to say about that. Did you watch it in the theater, Hasnain, or?
No, I'm never going to the theater. I wait till it comes on TV. No, I was kidding.
And
I actually,
I saw it online actually, and when I saw it, so like you guys know me. When I watch something, I think I put Islamophobia in the backseat for now because I want to see the production quality. I want to see the acting.
The cinematography.
From a filmmaker's perspective, that's what I'm watching a film for. But it was really hard for me to do that in that film. It was just really hard for me. I mean, you have a blockbuster guy, you have like a multi-million-dollar production, you know. For me, it's just like, like this shot is great. This shot is great. That's usually how I am. But for that film, it's just like, it kind of ruined it for me, you know, and it kind of ruined it for a lot of people. And it's sad because, you know, it's just like, really, like, this is what you guys came up with? Out of all the ideas you can come up with, this is what you came up with?
Yeah, I remember in the aftermath of that film, there was a few tweets that were going viral about people who'd walked out of the theater and just said things like, oh, I love that film, now I want to go kill some Arabs. Really horrible stuff like that. And I remember also, you know, what's interesting about that film is that there was not one positive Muslim character in the entire film.
Not a single.
In the entire film. And there was even a joke by one of the comedians here. I completely forgot his name. He was like, Americans are the only, no offense to you guys, I know you're both American. Americans are the only kind of people that would invade your country and then make a film about how killing your people made them cry. Which, it is really horrible. And I think American Sniper for me is so horrible that I've actually got a theory. And, you know, the more I think about this, the more I think it might be true. I've got a theory that this was actually made as a parody of the way Americans see wars in the world, which should be a very deep, you know, inside job. Let's call it. But you know that's how bad it is for me.
You know, to quickly comment on what you said about how Americans would invade and then cry because you made it's actually very interesting because living here and working in an industry that's dominantly white males. I'm talking about my first job, finance. People really think that by us sending troops overseas, we're protecting ourselves. And that's so deeply rooted in like the American culture that's not like Pakistani American, Indian American type of like people who are more woke, I would say. And it was really surprising. Like that's how you see it. Interesting. And that you have to go there to protect yourself here when we've never been attacked aside from 9/11, I would say. But it's really, really deeply rooted, and it's an eye opener for me.
And I think what's sad is, and perhaps something we could speak about later on, is the fact that the American government understands how powerful Hollywood is. Because I remember in the Obama days, Joe Biden himself was had a meeting, sitting down with Hollywood executives, speaking about how they can defeat the ISIS ideology through film. And so it's kind of upsetting that American the American government is well aware of the power of the film, but I feel like Muslims perhaps aren't as aware of how powerful film can change narratives and change the mindset of people, and ultimately the saddest thing is the people who are telling our stories, and the stories of terrorism are people who are not even Muslim. So unfortunately Muslims usually get thrown on the bus.
So Ali, I gave you so much time to think about a film. This is the reason why I'm talking so much up nothing.
This is my topic, or this is my pick. But I will tell you this though, since I've been down here, a lot of people, they go based off of obviously like the movies and the media, not just the news, but also the movies and the TV series that go on, for example, like Homeland and so forth. And when I meet people here and they find out that I'm Muslim, they're like, wait, you're not the same as what we've seen on TV. It's very different.
Wow.
And that's the perception here.
That's
So
crazy.
some have been watching Turkish series or other series that are outside of the US, like outside of Hollywood, and they kind of understand and they get it. But the ones that kind of stick to like Netflix and Hollywood and that's it, they just don't know, and they're surprised that I'm Muslim because they're like, oh no, you're supposed to have a long beard and dress a certain way and be a certain person. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works.
That's really interesting how that feeds into the kind of the good Muslim and the bad Muslim narratives and the tropes. Like they see you as Ali's our colleague, he's one of us, he's cool, he's this, he's part of the industry, and but those guys over there are the bad ones. But Ali's cool. He plays football with us every weekend and whatnot. And I think something really interesting that Hasnain you brought up earlier is that you go to watch films at home or in the cinema to appreciate the cinematography, right?
Right.
And what people go for different reasons. Like I go for escapism. I want to appreciate a really well made story narrative, and when you're looking at it through a critical eye, like as we do, these things jump out. Like when we watch Bodyguard, that the Islamophobia jumped out at us. But if you're not watching it with that critical eye, these things they become internalized in the way you think in your subconscious, right? So people who just go for escapism, they are constantly reinforced by negative images and narratives that just slowly just seep into their mind, and then it comes out as something that's quite quote unquote innocent, like you've experienced, Ali, as in like, no, but you're not like the other ones. That's interesting. I think
I remember during 24's heydays, I forgot which season it was, but there was one season which was particularly Islamophobic, that if it got so many complaints. And I remember even at the time, Muslim Council of Britain, like I think, did a formal complaint about the show because of how bad the Islamophobia was. But at the time, there was an advertising campaign for the show, and I think in the show, there was someone's neighbor who was a Muslim family, and one of them was a terrorist or something like that. And the advertising campaign they did were these big billboards of a Muslim family saying something like, these guys could be your neighbors, be careful, something like that. And that's how Islamophobic it was, right? But it's just so interesting that, Muslims are really at the bottom of the barrel, and that's the kind of stuff can happen. You can't do those kind of things when it comes to other minorities, and rightfully so. But when it comes to Muslims, unfortunately, we are fair game. And like kind of leading on from that, Shaf, why is Muslim representation in film so bad? Is it intentional? Is it some sort of conspiracy? Are people really trying to make Muslims in Islam look bad, or is it just complete ignorance, a lack of Muslims in the industry? What's the reasoning behind it?
It means it's a huge question, but really I think it's the way that Muslims have been portrayed in film and TV and in the arts, broadly speaking. I mean, and I'm including video games in that as well. I think it's not new. It's not new how Muslims have been represented poorly. Now, I think it's always been about a narrative of the other and like otherization. And if you look at the history of film always is. I mean, I think Nouri, you said it earlier about how closely tied it is to the geopolitics of the day, right? I think it's and oftentimes it's used as a means of propaganda as well. And so when your question is in like, is why is it that there's not enough Muslims in the industry? I think, what, the more I've done this project, the more I've realized there are a lot of Muslims in the industry. There are a lot. I mean, Hasnain and Ali can speak for that more closely because they are from the industry. But we've been talking to so many, not only in front of camera talent, but also behind the camera, technicians and directors and filmmakers who just don't get the same opportunities as your white male would. I think so. Those stories are out there. They're just not being told. And there's a director. I live in Manchester, and there's a director here who I spoke to not long ago, and he said he was commissioned a piece by a large broadcasting company in the UK. I'm anonymizing it because through his wishes, and he was said, but can this be more about the race? They're always being pushed towards the narrative that they know sell. Can it be more about the race? Can it be more about the religion? So those stories are out there, the talent is out there, but it's more of an industry level thing that those stories just don't make it through to the mainstream. And when they do, when we do see a really great example, that's why we celebrate it so much, because it's so unusual for us to see that, right?
Right. Why do you think that is? Why do you think these Muslims behind the scenes and in front of the scenes aren't getting as much opportunity as perhaps they should?
I guess that's a bigger question for maybe Hasnain or Ali to kind of give an answer to. I think I want to pass the mic on that one.
Hasnain, tell me.
What was the question again?
Why is it that someone, an actor as great as yourself, is limited to independent films and isn't the star of I don't know what show is the Crown or something?
Yes, yeah, I see what you're saying. There's a few reasons. One, like Shaf said, there's a lot of talent, and so competition is huge. If I go into an audition room, I'm like, listen, like they're looking for a Pakistani actor. Like, how many can there be? When I go into an audition room, it's packed with 20, 30, 40 people that look just like me, speak just like me. It's very interesting. Some are, if it's an open casting call, everybody and their mom's gonna come because they just want that opportunity. But if it's doing a manager and agent, like there's gonna be a lot. There's a lot of talent out there. I've met more talent behind the scenes than as actors. And the reason why it's difficult is because this goes back to my points in a few podcasts ago. The competition is so rough, especially when you get a casting call for a feature film or for a show, for anything, even a short film that requires somebody like you, that it's hard to collaborate with peers because everybody's kind of off on their own. That's one reason I would say. It's because everybody thinks that you look like me, you speak like me, you're my competition. Instead of collaborating together to build something big, you're my competition. And it's sad that it's to that point. Point number two I would make is because it's a competition and everybody, and it's like a dog eat dog world. Especially I'm speaking about New York, based where I'm at. Everybody wants their own story out. Everybody has their own story. Everybody wants their own story out. I think everybody's writing the same story about the Muslim in America and the tough. Everybody's writing the same exact story. I've read scripts from people, not yours, Nouri, yours is different, but I've read scripts from people. And it's just like the message is the same, whether it's a female Muslim, whether it's a male Muslim. So I was just like, okay, if I'm like a production company and you come to me with this script, how many more have I read that's exactly the same? You know what I mean? Like, we're looking for that needle in a haystack, and that's very rare to come across. And I'm not trying to discourage people, but I'm just saying, stop. Like, I think that we're past the whole Muslim in America, Muslim in the West story, and I think it's time for us to take a Muslim American or a Muslim in general and kind of just put him in a role that's just a normal person. Like, it goes back to my 008 joke that I made the first podcast. Like, 007 has always been a white male detective or whatever he is. Why not make a film? Yeah, spy. Why not make a film with okay, here's a Muslim American who's a spy, and he just happens to be amazing at being a spy, and they don't look at him because of who he is. They look at him because of what he can do.
And Ali Alvi is the perfect person to cast for that role. Ali, what speaking on Hasnain's experience, I mean, did you find that as well? Was it very competitive when you were applying for roles, or did you not kind of see that?
I mean, clearly Hasnain and I are very two different people, right?
Listen, the age gap is big, man. The generation is different.
See, whenever there's a script, he's auditioning for young person in the family, and you're auditioning for the father role, right? That's how it goes.
So yes, to a point, yeah, it is the case, right? When you walk in, you see a lot of people that look just like you. But secondly, you also have the fact that how they say the victor writes history, right? So it's sort of like that. That's what's happening. That's what's been happening, is that we didn't start Hollywood. We're trying to get our our foot in the door. So whoever started it, majority, and what the majority is in the US right now, that's what you're going to see most of. So as that changes, as the racial demographics change, and I think that's when we're going to start seeing more Muslims, just like it happened with African Americans. Same thing's going to happen with Arabs, Muslims, whatever you want to call it. So that's that. And I just remembered something when he said about like a Muslim American spying on being a spy. I don't know if you guys saw today that I think it was the Supreme Court or which court it was that they ruled that now the people that were.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. FBI agents were trying to coerce Muslims into becoming informants and put them on the no-fly list when they didn't, right? Yeah, Supreme Court shut them down. I think you know what's really interesting is that I think all the points you guys made were very interesting, but I think one thing that we are kind of forgetting is the fact that if someone wants a certain story to be told, that story will be told in that way. I remember there was a very inspiring lecture. I've mentioned this podcast before. I heard from Riz Ahmed once in Chicago, and he was saying, like, I've been in news writers' rooms and I've been in writers' rooms when it comes to TV shows, and both are exactly the same thing. And he was saying that he was sent to Turkey to do a news report with Anderson Cooper. And CNN at the time told him, listen, find us some angry protesters protesting there was some sort of anti-Muslim or anti-Turkish sentiment at the time. They were like, find us some very angry Muslim protesters. And they were like, we were there for a month looking for these protesters. We couldn't find any. So we went to the producers and said, listen, we got a better idea for you. Let's tell a nice story about Turkish Muslims in Turkey and how they live and something like that. And the producers were like, no, we asked you for angry Muslim protesters. That's what we want. And he said the next day they switched on CNN and they saw angry Muslim protesters on the screen. So I feel like when the people who have the power and authority to tell stories want to tell certain stories, they will be told. I remember hearing the executive producer, his name has completely escaped me, of 24, speaking about after 24 about how he didn't acknowledge his responsibility in writing that show when it came to representing Muslims. The next show he went on to make was Homeland. So it's obvious that he doesn't care, or he's that unintelligent, which I'm sure he's not. It's obvious that there's a clear, to me anyway, there seems to be a clear roadmap to demonize Muslims, or at least some Muslims. And leading on from that, Shaf, I wanted to ask you, because there are very few, as I say, not all heroes wear capes, and there are very few heroes that are fighting this multi-billion-dollar industry, but you are one of them. So I wanted to ask you about the Riz test. I'm sure everyone who's listening has heard of it, but just for any who weren't too familiar or wanted to just understand exactly what it was, what is the Riz test, and how exactly did it come about? Why did you decide to put it together?
Yeah, so I think the title of Heroes probably too grand. I think probably Geek with a Laptop is probably
Mr. Robot
more. Yeah, that's exactly it, right? So I think it came about a couple of years ago now, and probably more than that, probably going about 5 or 7 years ago now. Me and a good friend, Dr. Sadia Habib, who's the co-founder of the Riz Test, we met through some anti-racism activism stuff that we were doing together, and we knew us and a bunch of others would often go to the cinema together, the theater together, etc., and we'd always have the same conversations. And these are conversations that I can guarantee each of you have had over the dinner table in the past. Wasn't that a great show? Wasn't that a great film? If it wasn't for that one scene or that one character that was Islamophobic or whatever. And the more we had these conversations, we realized that everyone's having these conversations, and then slowly but surely, her being an academic, she's an academic doctor, not an MD, and me just with my geek sensibilities, we kind of thought, well, how can we stop just having conversations, and how can we start affecting change? And that's when we thought, we were kind of inspired by the Bechdel test.
Right.
The test that's like a 3 criteria test that measures how well or poorly women are represented in film and TV.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of thought, well, what would a Muslim version of that look like? What would the criteria be? And that was it, really. That was the conversation we had for a long time. And then as time went on, it became more and more serious, and thought let's start writing down every trope that we can possibly think of that Muslims are presented in film and TV. And we did, and I think the list was like maybe 70 criteria. We thought, well, that's probably too academic and too nuanced. So we kind of found that there were really three themes that came out of all of them, and that was terror, culture, and gender. And from those three themes, we developed the 5-stage Riz test, and that's really where it came about. And then and again, we didn't realize how much of a big conversation this was. We created a test. I created a Twitter account because, as we all know, nothing exists without a Twitter account. And so we kind of just put it out there, thinking let's just kind of just let's let it happen. And very quickly it was picked up by everyone, really. Kind of everyone thought finally there's a way to measure this. And Nouri, I know you guys at the Muslim Vibe were really early supporters, and and that's how we connected in the first place. And we kind of thought, well, we're onto something here. And me being a techie, I wanted it to be a crowdsourced effort, so it's not just me watching films all day, even though that's I'd love to do that, but I couldn't possibly go through the entire history and back catalogue. And so yeah, that's really where it came from. It's kind of spun up, and we called it the Riz test after Riz Ahmed, and he did his famous talk at the House of Commons about representation. And we kind of thought, well, our working title was the Bechdel test for Muslims, which was quite a long Twitter handle. So we thought, so we called it the Riz test, and the rest is history, really.
Yeah, I remember when you guys when I first came across it, and it was just continuously blowing up. Everyone was picking it up, and I think my reaction was similar to so many other reactions, because I remember at the time, I believe this was I want to say 2017. Yeah, I remember at the time I had written an article, why Hollywood is to blame for Islamophobia. So it was a long read article, so it was really, really long. But it was just basically all my frustrations about Muslim representation in Hollywood, and I was saying this is why there's Islamophobia in America. That was the point I was making. And then I came across the Riz test, and it was just like, wow, subhanAllah, sometimes you put something out there and you realize that other people out there working toward the same thing. But my initial reaction was like, that's exactly what we need. That's exactly a way to hold Hollywood to account. And I'm sure that was the reaction of many. And again, you even mentioned Riz Ahmed's speech, and I'm sure Hasnain and Ali, you guys have seen it as well. That speech was phenomenal, because again, like, we all sat back thinking, you know what, he just said everything that we were thinking in an even better way and more. And I think that speech was so important, because he really went out and not only analyzed the problems that exist, but analyzed the serious repercussions of what can happen. I remember there was a line in his speech where he said, when an ISIS fighter goes to fight ISIS, in his mind, he's a version of James Bond. He's a version of an action hero. And because he hasn't got that representation to look up to in film, he has nowhere else to turn to but groups like ISIS to give him that sort of affirmation.
For me, it's very respectable, because what you said is valid, but for him to even use his platform to say that, which many other Muslim actors, singers, writers, anybody in the arts who made it as far as he had, probably wouldn't use their platform for that, And I think that's very brave of him, because it's very brave to stand up there in front of an industry who can easily take your career away or make your career to say, hey, we have an issue here. So I look at it that way. But yeah, it was an amazing speech.
Why do you think so many other Muslims in the industry are afraid to speak, or haven't been as vocal?
It's my opinion is because of how hard it is to get to the top, right? It's like, think of it as like, this is a really stupid analogy, but like, if you're skinny, like me, and you start working out, you're gonna see gains quick, but to get to the end goal, you have to diet, you have to like work out hard, you have to be strict. Like, when you get that 6-pack or what, I remember watching Kumail Nanjiani's workout video, and how he said that it took him so much effort, more than anything in his life, to get to that body that he has right now, that it's hard for him to think of his body not sustained that way. So think of that in like your career, you know, for somebody to work and work and work like Hassan Minhaj and Riz Ahmed to get to the platform where they are today, and for them to slip something from their mouth and have their whole career shattered, like it's a huge risk for them. And I kind of understand where they're coming from. So that's why I think that when Hassan Minhaj, because he, you know, he's an advocate for Muslim representation, so is Riz Ahmed, when they speak out, like, you know, I clap for them because they're using their platform for a positive cause. Where, you know, I don't want to drop names, but there's other bigger artists than them who, you know, stay quiet. And I understand, you know, it's a dog eat dog world, you know, so you get to see it from both angles.
Ali, do you think that people who are in the limelight, who are famous, Muslims especially, have a responsibility to speak out, you know, when it comes to things like Muslim representation or even other issues, you know, for example, Palestinians, let's say Uyghurs, you know, I think, or even Kashmir, you know, I feel like I was amazed when Hasan Minhaj did a whole episode about Saudi Arabia on his show on Netflix, because I was like, how did he even get away? And he didn't get away with that because, you know, Saudi.
You see what I mean?
Saudi,
you see what I mean?
Saudi destroyed the show. But the thing is, like I was just amazed that he even dared to do it. So I mean, Ali, and the thing is, Ali, you work in the charity sector. You know, you work in with Who Is Saying, who continuously highlights oppressed movement. So from that kind of perspective, you know, when someone makes it, when someone gets to the top, as Hasnain said, or becomes famous, do you think they have more responsibility, or do you think sometimes it's better to be quiet in order to maintain their position and clout?
Well, yes and no. It depends on the person, what their goals are in life. If their goal is to help others or bring up these types of things, or they have that compassion in them, then yes, of course they're going to. But if their goal is, hey, I'm going to go and get to the top, make money, become more famous, and that's it, then what are you going to do? Tell them, oh, you know, you have to do it?
So it's down to intention, is your perspective?
Yeah, I see that point.
For sure.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
I think it's also what I mean, again, I'm not from the industry, so I can't speak on behalf of people. What I can only tell you, what the kind of stories that I've heard is that as Hasnain said, it's so difficult to make it in the industry. You know, you have to have the perfect teeth, and you have to have this, and you have the six pack and all of that. Do you really want, you know, some dodgy tweets as well as that? And do you want to be outspoken and all of those things? I think you know, Riz Ahmed was able to. It's taken a great deal of courage for him to say what he said, but he's had to take those unfortunate roles to get to where he is now, to have that platform to say what he needs to say. So it's not been easy for him. It's been he's had to he did the film The Road to Guantanamo Bay, right? So and a couple of other things that probably don't even pass the Riz test, right? But he had to do that to get to a point where he could speak up. And I completely, whenever with the Riz test, we never ever hold acting professionals to account, because it's always, there's a whole industry behind that, right? It's always the writer, the producers, the showrunners. There's a whole lot. There's an industry behind that. And end of the day, if you're going into acting or tech or dentistry, whatever you want to do. Sorry, I'm talking a lot about teeth at the moment because I went to the dentist today.
It's all right.
It's
just vent out. Just vent.
Clearly, there are unresolved issues. It's because you know you need to pay rent. You need to make your way. You need to kind of do the job to get to where you need to be. So oftentimes it's difficult for people to say, because they've got to a point where if they are the exception that rises above the parapet and says something, then they are made the exception. And again, Hasnain, as you said, you know, all it takes is, you know, all of the hard work to be, you know, it's like the rug that's pulled underneath you.
Yep.
But how much leeway do you have to give? And Hasnain, I'll throw this question at you, because you know you're an actor, and you know you're continuously in work. How much leeway do you have to give? You know, Shaf mentioned, for example, Riz when he was coming up, and Riz speaks about this himself. There were certain roles he had to take on that he might not take on right now. You know, that might either show Muslims in a negative light, or even you know, from a perspective of, you know, as an actor, I don't know, like how many terrorist roles can you play until you're like, you know what, I don't have any dignity here. You know, I mean,
I see the point. For me, I would take on roles, to be honest with you, because you have to understand this way: one role pays you and makes that connection to move on. So what's the give and get that you take? Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be Suicide Bomber one.
No, but the thing is,
On a,
Hasnain. The thing is, Hasnain. I know it's different when it comes to A-list stars, but a lot of actors who are super successful, like I'll
yeah.
give you an example off the top of my head, Matthew McConaughey. What was he
Okay.
known for in the past? Those standard romance films.
Yeah.
He was always the hunk guy. Then one day he said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm gonna do serious roles. And even though they offered him crazy money to keep doing those roles, he's like, no, I've decided. I'm gonna. This is what I want. His own kind of dignified stand. So wouldn't it be a case of? I mean, again, like maybe I'm not too familiar with the industry, but wouldn't it be a case of, hey, you come out right and say, I'm not doing a terrorist role, therefore I will not get cast in one, and therefore this is my stand. Would your career suffer? I mean, or would it just push you to more greatness?
I wouldn't say it would suffer. I would say that my progress would slow down, only because the more I mean, it's a quantity business, right? It's the more you've seen on television, the more they're familiar with you. So when you go into an audition, I've already seen you. I've
Okay.
known your work. You know what I mean? When you're in the indie circuit like me, like a filmmaker that I am, I have complete control over my projects, right? So for me, it's different. But when I do go into the audition room, because I do both. I make my own films and then I also audition for a bunch of films. I go my whole mentality changes. When I'm doing my project, this is what I want to show, everything in the positive. When I'm in the audition room, it's like, all right, turn all that off, because right now you're just trying to get the damn role. Because if I progress there, I can progress in my filmmaking. It's just like Shaf said, you got to take on some roles to build your name up, and your name means everything. And then once you build up to a platform, what you say speaks volumes. Whereas right now, what I say speaks volume to like you three, because you're the only one that'll listen to me. But once I move up, once I have a film streaming on Netflix that's a blockbuster hit, when I say something about the Palestinian cause or any cause that's affecting me, it goes a longer way. But I'm willing to take that risk when I'm up there, because I've been through all that work. It's very easy to rebuild yourself. I mean, you might be blacklisted from the industry, but that from the industry, but that'll never stop me from making films.
Shaf, were you surprised with how far the Riz test, or with the initial reaction, and are you surprised with how far it's come? And what was the original initial reaction? And this roller coaster ride that you've been on, like, what's been your thought process and reflections throughout?
Yeah, so I think our first mission at the beginning, our mission was to kind of create this test and to be able to put it out there, crowdsource it, get a bunch of data, and then just to see where are the trends, what are the trends in this data, and we put it out, and that was going to be look, we'll do it in our own time. It'll kind of come about, and then we put it out there, and it created, it had its life of its own. It really went out, and everyone picked it up, and we were named in so many articles were written about us, not only in the UK but in the Middle East and a lot in the States as well. And we mentioned LA Times and the New York Times and all sorts of stuff. And and I remember sat there. I was working with this client at the time, and I was knee deep in some technical documentation, writing some technical specs, and my phone just went berserk. And I looked down and I scrolled down to the bottom, and it was because Riz Ahmed had tweeted it himself,
Nice.
and then it got retweeted and all his fans and all of that, and I think at that point we realized, okay, that this is more than just a pet project between me and Sadia. And so I think so the reception been wonderful, largely wonderful from people, not just Muslims, from other minorities who also expressed this. There's, I mean, the Riz test is not the only test out there, right? There's the Duvernay. I'm thinking saying this wrong there now, but Ava Duvernay, right?
Yeah.
There's been a test named after her as well.
Nice.
And there's a test for how Latinx people are represented in film and TV as well. So there's a lot of people who supported us, and I think what this really meant for us was that, right, there's a need for this data that has never really existed before. And again, I'm a techie and I'm obsessed with these things, but really this data set that we're compiling, and hopefully inshallah give us like 2 or 3 months and we'll be able to publish our first findings from it. But really it's fascinating because the reviews that we've had in aren't just what you'd expect, like Hollywood films and TV shows and Western stuff. Lots of Bollywood films have been submitted as fails. Lots of surprisingly, very specifically, Malayalam films, and that they tend to do quite well actually, and that's a very that's a very specific language in its own right, or as a part of India, and that seemed really great for Muslims and Iranian films and TV. So it's been brilliant to see all that, and what some of the really interesting themes that were coming through it is that, and again, this will form part of our research when we release it. But films have failed in themes failed the Riz test for different reasons as time's gone on. Because films, we've got some films that have been reviewed from the early 1900s, right? Silent films, and at that time they were obsessed with the Orientalist view of Muslims as in the the Oriental East, and Hollywood was obsessed with women in harems and wearing basically bikinis and a niqab, which worked that out, right? And all of that kind of stuff, and like the whole Alibaba and the 40 Thieves kind of stuff. And then you follow the course of time and the course of the geopolitics, and then you hit World War One, where the Ottomans were there was like Nazism and the Ottomans kind of like there's the whole like otherization there as well. Then you've got the 1960s and 70s, and then surprise you hit 9/11 and you see a different trend.
Right.
I think what's really interesting in all of this data is the reason, because there's 5 criteria, so it's the reason that fails the Riz test that fluctuates over time, and you were seeing really fascinating trends. And I think to say that it's not connected to geopolitics, although a lot of people say is disingenuous. And another piece of feedback we get from a lot of people is well, isn't this just art imitating life? Aren't people just creating films on what's happening in the world, right? And on the face of it, that's a reasonable argument to make. But then as all of us know, who any Muslim who reads the news, you're seeing all these stats about how you're more likely to be run over by a bus than to be in a terrorist attack or hit by lightning. One statistic that I'm fascinated by is that in the US, you are more likely for a television to fall on you than to be in a terrorist attack. And if this was if this was art imitating life, where are all the killer TV shows, right? Where are all the films about this flat screen LEDs? That's
I have to write one now. I have to write one.
Hey, salam guys. Before we continue the conversation, I wanted to reach out to you guys to subscribe to us on all platforms. We are on Apple Podcasts, we are on Spotify, we are on Anchor, and we are on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review. It really does help out the channel. And if you're finding this episode beneficial, please do share it with your friends, share it on social media. We are here building a community of Muslims who have a fascination with different forms of art and its relationship on their spirituality. So be sure you're subscribed, as we have many fantastic guests and episodes coming up.
One thing that that came to mind was you're talking about data. I say data, because I know you're the geek. So
you're free to say data however you want on this. On this show, we love all access. Don't worry.
So like you say that you're constantly looking at data. So I'm assuming the Riz test and the analysis that goes behind it is a constant. Like you're constantly looking at this data. It's a constant change.
Yeah.
So one thing that I wanted to ask you was, is there any flaw to the test? And the reason why I asked that, and I'm saying this in the most respectful way, but no offense, because I know you worked hard on it. But for example, if I was to take a film that's based on a real story, for example, 9/11. There's a film about 9/11 portraying every possible detail that happened 9/11. The hijackers were from a specific country that shall not be named. And then, it was, airline, and it hit New York City. So it's based on a true event, and like the writers did their best to portray the actual event. and that doesn't pass the Riz test. Like for me, that's the first thing that came to my mind. I was like, okay, cool. Like this is a great test, but how do you depict like films that are portraying things that actually happen in real life? And that's the reason the word flawed came to my mind. It's like, okay, are you aware of some flaws that this test had that you're working on? Is there a second, upgrade to it? Like what's going on? That's just come to my mind.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and it's not and it's not controversial at all. We're very
Yeah.
aware of its limitations, and I mean, look, the Riz test is 5 criteria, right?
Right.
It's 5 where there's a sea of problems, and there's a sea of nuances that are all worthy of investigation, right? The Riz test is a blunt instrument, and we're very aware it's a blunt instrument. So when it comes to a film, Bodyguard comes out, right? Fail. We bang it on, fail, right?
Yeah.
That ping came at the perfect time when I did that.
And so when I edit it, I'll make sure it just comes a bit earlier.
So then there are, as you've said, there are documentaries out there that depict very sensitively. Actually, some of them are very sensitively done, really well researched, and due to the nature of the show or the TV show or the documentary, they're gonna inherently fail the Riz test because it's telling a story. And the Riz test is not nuanced enough to kind of deal with that, and we're completely aware of that. But we keep going back to that the Riz test is not nuanced, right? It's a blunt instrument, but that's because the industry is not nuanced.
Right.
Where the conversation with the industry is right now, it needs that blunt instrument. It needs to kind of shatter something. It needs to shatter a glass for it to. And once we are at a point where the industry is having, once we see those shows where we have I was listening to your podcast when we talk about Agent 786. Once we have those, right, I think then we'll be ready to have a nuanced conversation about these things. But until then, until we start seeing, a film about a F1 champion who just happened to move Muslim, got Abdul Basit, right, the F1 driver. Until we have that, then we need that blunt instrument. But that being said, the Riz test is really the start of what we're doing here. It's 5 criteria that we're starting with, but the conversation is much more nuanced. One thing we've come across in the past is the kind of entry criteria for the Riz test is does the film contain a character, an identifiably Muslim character, right? But what about films that don't have Muslims as characters in them, but where Islam and Muslims are being spoken about in a derogatory way?
Right.
So that technically doesn't it passes the Riz test, right? Even though it's horrible, they might be seeing all sorts of horrible things, but technically that doesn't qualify for the Riz test. And what the Riz test has allowed us to do is give us a platform upon which we can do further research. I want to extend our field of research into looking at script analysis, looking at scripts, and if you take a look at there are resources out there where you can download subtitles for films, right? You can download thousands of films with the subtitles now, and I want to be able to build an algorithm that goes through subtitles and actually look at that and think, well, what and that will contain nuance after nuance, really, that to really understand that, just to really crunch through that data and understand every nuance in that. I think that the Riz test has given us that platform upon which we can do these interesting projects. So you're 100% right. Not taking it personally at all. I think it's a very valid criticism, and this is how we get better, right? If it's hearing opinions and thoughts. I think that's really, really valid.
I'm a very, very critical guy, man.
I mean, just kind of unpacking from both your perspectives. I think nuance is a very, very interesting conversation to have, because again, like even something as horrid as American Sniper, like I said in the beginning. It could, and I'm probably wrong with this, but it's just, like I said, just a theory of mine. It could entirely just be a reflection of America's racism, and that's what the director intended. On like a much lesser level, I know, Shaf, you mentioned shows that don't depict Muslims, but have like slurs in it. I remember I was watching Better Call Saul We all love Better Call Saul. We all love Saul. We all know he's a good guy. Every so often he throws in an Islamophobic trope. Oh, can we make this guy a terrorist? He says these kind of things, but like to me, it's not reinforcing Islamophobia. It's showing how ignorant he is. Personally, that's just like how I kind of interpret it. And Hasnain, I know you mentioned, for example, films about the World Trade Center or whatever. I think what's interesting is that we forget that many of the victims of 9/11 were Muslims.
Yeah.
One of the earliest documentaries I did years ago now was about interviewing Muslims and their experience on 9/11 who were by the towers, who were running away from the debris. And even like, I'll give you another example. Today I was watching a film, I'm sure you guys have seen it, Lone Survivor, Mark Wahlberg, telling the true story of a group of American soldiers who were attacked by the Taliban and kind of sought refuge and were saved by some Afghanis. And what's so interesting is that on the surface of a film like that, you have the Taliban who are bad, and you have the good Muslims who rescue Mark Wahlberg, and
the villagers.
The villagers, and you have that kind of balance. But what annoyed me was that the Taliban were always saying Allahu Akbar when they kill people. These guys, when they kill people, when they were defending him, never shouted the same thing. And I remember right at the end, there's this it's a very minor thing, and it's not even a lie or anything false, but it just really frustrates me. At the end, it's you have the kind of captions that come on screen telling bits of the true story, and it says that the tribe who took the soldier in did so because of an ancient 2,000-year-old. They specifically used the word 2,000-year-old tribal tradition, where they must protect a guest who comes into their village. So to me, it's like they went out of their way to say, even if they did good, it wasn't because of Islam. It was because of this culture. Their culture, right? And it's like these little things I feel like are there just to kind of like push, any goodness of Islam out of the window, which I find really frustrating.
Interestingly enough, I just want to you mentioned the Taliban. The Taliban are the bad guys right now, but if you rewind history and go back to Rocky 3, right? They were the freedom fighters. Right, so it depends. It's the same Taliban, right? But Hollywood have decided actually, no. They were great at that time because they helped defeat the Russians invading Afghanistan, right? But they were the freedom fighters. Rocky was with the Taliban, and the next thing you know, as time's gone on, and his history's kind of molded this narrative, and now they are the bad guy because it's convenient. But you're right. Sorry, I've kind of jumped in with my answer here, but I think what's really interesting is that there's a film. I think it's The Siege. I think it's The Siege where in the film there's the siege is about it's like these camps for Muslims, the Arabs in New York because something bad happened, right? And there's the bad Muslims and the good Muslim as the one that's closest to the FBI or the CIA, whatever it was. And you mentioned earlier, anything good has Islam kind of stripped out of it. The good Muslim is seen in his proximity to power, to whiteness, to law enforcement, but is also seen drinking as well. Yeah. So the less Muslim is the good Muslim.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And again, like I alluded to before, I feel like these aren't ignorant choices made. These are very specific choices to me anyway. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I have my own kind of emotional answer to this. But I want to ask you guys, how important do you think... I'm not going to cry, don't worry.
No, it's going to be a poem.
It's not going to be a poem, no. This is the one space I have to escape poetry, alhamdulillah. So I'm just trying to avoid it. Ali, I'll ask you this first. How important do you feel that Muslim representation is in film?
I think it's very important.
And why? And why?
Because we want to obviously let people know that what real Islam is not what you've been seeing on Hollywood and on CNN and so on and so forth. And this, like we were talking about earlier, about I think Biden, when he was vice president, was trying to do, not for Islam directly, but what he was trying to do. So basically using media is a great way of talking to the masses about talking to them and telling them what Islam is, as opposed to one-on-one. So that's why I think it's very important to have that, and we need to keep pushing like we're doing, like Hasnain's doing, knocking on the door, and then some of the other actors and artists that are already in Hollywood doing work. I think we need to start portraying Islam in the positive light that it is.
Do you feel like bad Muslim representation exists? You mentioned CNN. As we all know, the news industry, especially in America, is essentially a money-making industry, and unfortunately, stories about Muslims sell like crazy, right? So that's why they're there. Do you feel like the industry of Islamophobia is so strong because it's profitable, and it's not the fault of the industry itself, but the fault of people who are willing to consume it?
Yeah, I mean, before Islam, it was something like the war on drugs, and before that, it was maybe the Japanese, and before that, it was Mexicans, whatever, right? So it's always got to be somebody. So right now, it's Islam's turn.
Yeah.
Hasnain, what's your perspective?
I
know it's a very straightforward question, but I feel like we all have deep answers to it.
Yeah. So, is bad Muslim representation really bad Muslim representation? Like, think about it. Like,
that's
is
heavy.
Is bad Muslim representation, although we're being represented to move forward to give good representation, is it really bad representation then? Like, I'm pondering on that. Just food for thought. But to move forward, one of my really good friends is an African American filmmaker. And when I discussed it with him, he's like, listen, what Muslim people are going through in the industry is what African Americans went through in the industry before. And as you know now, African American media, Black entertainment, all this stuff, it's massive. It's huge. And they did a great job with it. But even he was telling me, listen, there was 2 or 3 things that I would go in for audition: drug dealer, gang member, or like a runaway father or something like that. He was like, it's either these 3: gang members, you're incarcerated, you did something bad. He was just like, we had to suck it up because we had to get our names well known. And if me having to play drug dealer on 7 different feature films gets me in front of the people that actually can change something, then I would do that, because I would take that first step so that the filmmakers behind me have an easier route and they can spread out in the future. And when he said that to me, I was just like, okay, like that's when the question came: is okay, so is bad Muslim representation actually bad Muslim representation, or are we following the same route? You know what I mean? Do we have to sacrifice?
Is it a means to an end, is what you're saying?
Yeah. So, I take lessons from him because he is obviously more senior than me, and I always reach out to him whenever I need something, because he's been there, done that, and he lives in Atlanta now, which is huge with African American media and whatnot. But one thing I do want to say is media is huge. It's massive. For example, like the coverage about the farmers' protest today it's huge. Everybody that I know, whatever your background is, whether you're American, wherever you're from, knows about the farmers' protest happening today because it's important. That just shows you the power of media, because this is happening in India, where media can easily be shut off and nobody can know what's happening. But we need to have positive Muslim representation, because that same way that media spreads the news for people is the same way that it's showing many people how we live, which is contradictory to what I'm saying earlier. Like, is bad Muslim representation actually bad Muslim representation? And I'll leave the audience to think on their own. But we have a long way to go. And yes, like, if people are going to consume, and we live in a media consumed world, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, Netflix, Hulu, whatever, one bad image with millions of people watching, it's scarring.
I think on the flip side of that, for me, the time when I realized just how important Muslim representation is, and it's apt that we're speaking to you, Shaf, of the Riz Test, because at the time I was kind of following Riz Ahmed's work, and I remember he was in Nightcrawler, and I think he was in one of the Bourne movies or something like that. And I was like, oh, this guy, he's doing something really cool. Wow, great, good for him. And then I saw that he got cast in Star Wars. And I still remember seeing that still image of the cast of Rogue One, and Riz Ahmed, a British Pakistani, is there, a British Muslim Pakistani is there with the cast. And I was so taken aback by that, because I was like, I've consumed Hollywood films my entire life, almost religiously. And I had never thought that it was a place that any of us could even dream or dare to belong in. You know, the fact that one of us could be in Star Wars, could aspire to be in Star Wars and be in Star Wars. I remember he posted this post on Facebook once about how when he was young, he would dress up as Star Wars characters, as we all would, right? Yeah. And he never thought that one day he would actually be in a Star Wars movie. And for me, it was like, wow, you can actually aspire to be better. You can. We are worthy of moving to greatness. So I remember that was really one of the springboards that led me to leaving my job and joining the Muslim Vibe and getting into freelance work, because I was like, you know what, I can aspire to be better, because I've been told my whole life, even if subconsciously, even if even if it wasn't very overt, that I wasn't capable of going far. And I feel like so for me, that's when I realized how important Muslim representation is, because seeing him and others in those roles really taught me that we can aspire for more. So that's why I'm so passionate about the topic.
Yeah. So really quickly, it's not just Hollywood. It's also Bollywood that plays a massive role in Muslim representation, and in the negative way. And you guys know how critical I am of Bollywood. I used to watch it growing up, but then I stopped because my own personal reasons. But you have two of the biggest media platforms, and now we're fighting a battle on two fronts. So I just want to let the audience keep that in mind. Like, it's not just Hollywood. I think Bollywood has, if not more, bad Muslim representation.
Yeah, I think that's important.
And if you look at Bollywood, if you look at the biggest names in Bollywood, they're Muslim. Like Shah Rukh Khan, Amir Khan, all the Khans,
all the Khans.
Right? So they but then if Shah Rukh Khan has spoken in the past about very, very gingerly and very kind of subtly spoken about the way that Muslims are represented, because he knows he'll get lynched not figuratively speaking, of course, in India. So the backlash would be horrific for him, right? So, but you're right, Bollywood is particularly bad when it comes to representing Muslims. But it's just a really interesting point. I think it's an interesting point you've made about is any representation good representation, kind of get it through the bad to get to the good. There's a comic there's a comedian in the UK called Patrick Keelty. He's Irish, right? And he did this famous sketch where he spoke about I wasn't even listening, and he mentioned, being Irish, I know exactly what Muslims are going through. And this is part of his comedy sketch, and my age picked up, like, what's he saying about Muslims? And he says that I get it completely. Irish had it before, that we were stopped at airports, we were all terrorists, and now Muslims have got it. Muslims are going through that same thing. But then he goes, but on the plus side, now everyone celebrates St. Patrick's Day, right? Everyone goes out, everyone's claiming an Irish relative, and he goes, just give it 20 more years and we'll have Irish pubs, we'll have Muslim pubs, we'll have Muslim people. And it was hilarious. It was I thought that was a really clever kind of observation. So I don't know if I agree that let's get through the Bible, get to the good, because Muslims have been on screen and part of storytelling for over 100 years in Hollywood and in Bollywood, and things have not really got any better. I think I probably I think as you said, Nouri, it's still cliche, you can't be what you can't see, right? If you don't see, and again, that might feel a little bit simplistic, but the fact that you saw Riz, a British Pakistani from Wembley, right? Not from like a posh neighborhood, someone who's just from like a local guy who you probably played five-side soccer. Sorry,
Hasnain and Ali.
Yeah, man. I had football. I was just like, wait, kicking the ball. I don't know which one it is.
So it's
Listen, we're international here, man.
absolutely. So it's the kind of person that you grew up with, and you can relate to that story. It's great when you see that. You think, yeah, you know what? Yeah, they can get to that point. Not that we should need that permission from someone else, but the fact that someone else has made it like that. When Hasan Minhaj got his show on Netflix, I mean, that was brilliant. I mean, I thought that was a win for me, right?
Yeah.
I thought brilliant. I mean, what he does it so well. He kind of makes this serious point with comedy, and he's got his own great pedigree as well, being coming from the Daily Show, etc. But his the Patriot Act, I waited every week to watch that because that was brilliant. It was really, really good.
Yeah.
And he really leans into his identity as well. He talks that episode where he spoke about the Lota, right? I mean, he didn't even call it. He just went straight in with Lota, and like anyone who knows, everyone like you kind of feel, yeah, that joke is for me, right? That's for me specifically.
I just love that. Sorry to cut you. I love that clip when he goes to see, I don't know, Ali Hasnain, you've seen it. He goes to see Keith Ellison, and he's like, let's start with dua. And he just and I thought it was like a one-liner, but he just kept going on and on and on. He's like, I don't care anymore. I'm doing this. I'm here. I just thought that was absolutely brilliant. But yeah, Shaf, for sure. I mean, you know, like you said, it's not just the fact that he's British Pakistani Muslim. It's the fact that he's so close to home. You know, me and Riz have, I don't know him personally, we have a few like mutual friends in between. But it's just the fact that, you know, any one of us could have, you know, with hard work and with endurance, could have kind of gotten there as well. Side note, I actually went to school with Daisy Ridley. So Daisy Ridley was in my primary school. And I remember I was watching Star Wars, and I was like, where's this girl seems so familiar? And I remember like she was actually in my primary school. I believe she was in my class. So anyone can make it, subhanAllah. So that's really wonderful. I'm so glad you mentioned Hasan Minhaj as well, because we're in an age now where we have Riz Ahmed, Ramy Youssef, Hasan Minhaj, Kumail Nanjiani. You know, we have so many examples of Muslim South Asian representation there, not just like on the sidelines, but on the front lines in Marvel, in Star Wars, on Netflix, and soon on Apple TV, Hasan Minhaj. So we have Muslim representation, figures who are very well known. Do you think these figures have changed the conversation, Shaf, around Muslims in film? And do you think they, and again, I don't want to get into them personally, but the characters they play, you know, what they kind of represent on screen, do you feel that they are examples of positive Muslim representation, or would you like to see something different?
I think with people like Hasan Minhaj having a, you know, I know that I called it prime time, but I know it's not prime time. It's on demand kind of thing with Netflix. But having a Netflix show which are promoted so heavily, and having him on screen making these amazing, it's not just that he was he's making these observations and these shows. He's making international news, especially with the Saudi episode. I mean, each of them, he takes on US student loan debt. He talks about, you know, all sorts of stuff, really interesting stuff, and to see that and see someone who is so unashamedly authentic in terms of who he is, he's not watering it down, is hugely important. Riz Ahmed doing his, you know, Star Wars and Marvel and you know, and his music, that he does all his music as well. Mm-hmm. And Ramy Youssef, I think the more that these stories and experiences are normalized, the more we will see them, the less we will see them as exceptions, right? The less we will have a podcast talking about, oh, do you remember him? And do you remember him? It'll be like, yeah, it's just one of another, right? And Hasnain, you mentioned it earlier about the Black, you know, American experience, and I think in many ways the US is much further ahead in that conversation when it comes to race than the UK, to be quite honest. Because even in the UK, we had the Black Lives Matter demonstrations in the UK, and if you remember, you know, John Boyega was out there on the front. He was with his mic and kind of, you know, taking it, and there's really powerful images of him almost in tears, you know, shouting. And he even said that he knows that he's probably, will I work again after this? I don't know, right? And this is someone who's been in Star Wars with all of the stuff that he's done. still having to look over his shoulder about, will I still be, and then there was a huge outpouring of support from the industry, to him saying, look, I would do anything if you were just to read my script, etc. So I think there's a long way to go, I think, with the conversation. But I think the more that it's normalized, the better it is, not just for us, not just for Muslims, because oftentimes we grow up with these internalized visions of, I can't do this because I don't see, me myself on screen. All I see is negative, representation, and that it's such a human thing to internalize that, and for you to kind of think that, well, that's not for me.
Yeah.
So I think the more we see of it and the more it's normalized, the better. I would love for for us to kind of finish the Riz test thinking, well, it's all good now. What's the point? Let's just move on to something else. I can, finally get onto writing that novel. It's that kind of thing. But what I would love, I would love Muslim writers, producers, actors, just to be writing stories that don't have to be about the Muslim experience, right?
Right.
Why not have a sci-fi or a horror just written by a Muslim, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to always be about the Muslim. And Hasnain, you mentioned it earlier on that the immigrant story of it in America, and being a Muslim in the US, etc. Yeah, that's been done now, right? Well, how about a story of just a cool coming of age story? How about where's the Stand By Me written by a Muslim, right?
Yeah.
And Muslims are full of these stories, right? It's not like the talent's not out there writing these amazing stories. They are, but the more it's normalized and the more it's not exceptionalized, the better, I think.
Which is very.
Go ahead, Hasnain.
Go ahead.
No, please go.
I'm gonna shut up after this point. I promise.
No, please, Karen.
So
go for it.
Shaf mentioned novel. Isn't and something I pondered on is, isn't it interesting how there's bad Muslim representation in film, but if you actually read books, the representation of Muslim is actually the opposite, in my opinion. I've read so many novels, so many books where highlight Muslims as like these very respected, artistic, outgoing, peaceful people. So I just wanted the audience and yourself to ponder on that. It's like, think about the books you read and how two art forms, film and writing, in the novel space, in the story space, it's so different. It's so drastically different. Should I have anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really wonderful, novels out there that depict Muslims really, really well. What I mean, I can give you an example. It's not exactly what you're looking for, but it's something which is a little bit of a twist on it. Is that, and you mentioned Marvel. People talk about Miss Marvel, right? Great, everyone's seen it. Everyone's read it, and I believe it's been cast now, and they're gonna make a Disney Plus series on it, etc. It's gonna be wonderful, like great. But Marvel, Islamophobia exists in the Marvel universe, right? So if you kind of go back to, and it's interesting you mentioned the source text to the movie, because Iron Man, if we rewind back to Iron Man back in 2007, 2008, yeah, that's right. We remember the story, right? Tony Stark gets captured by Afghanis, and big bad Muslim looking guys, torture him until he kind of creates Iron Man, and he escapes, and that's that's what we all know. That was the start of the MCU. That was the start of the whole thing. But if you go back to the source text, if you go back to the comic that was released in 1968, Iron Man was actually created as a piece of anti-communist propaganda. And in the comic, and honestly, you can go back and read this, the bad guys aren't Afghanis, the bad guys are Vietnamese. So it's not, Raza and the 10 Rings group. It's Wong Chu, right, in Vietnam. So in the source text, it's anti-communist, and it's like it reflects the geopolitics of the day.
Right.
But when it came to Marvel Studios sitting down and writing this, let's put this together, they thought, hang on, no, we can't. The Vietnamese we can't single them out as the bad guys anymore. Well, who are the bad guys of today? The Muslims.
There we go.
So that was a decision that was made in the writing room. That's not even from the that was nowhere near the source text, but the source text was Vietnamese. But all of a sudden, in the writing room, a decision was made. Let's insert Muslim into this, and that's what we saw on screen. And the most hilarious part of that, if you go back and watch Iron Man, the in the Taliban caves where they're escaping, you'll hear these Afghanis speak Urdu, Arabic, and Farsi. He's like, who are these geniuses, right?
There we go.
But even in Iron Man, there's the scene where he comes back to liberate the woman from the sweatshop.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just like, it was just a mess, man.
Yeah. And something recently, actually, that again, you kind of get shocked every time you see. It's more shocking the more recent the example, right? Because you kind of think, oh, we're living in this woke era. Is that recently I just finished watching The Boys on Amazon Prime. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
I've seen it.
No, I haven't seen it.
I had to fast forward a lot, but I've seen it.
Yeah, you have to.
Just disclaimer, guys.
I take my time with it. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Nouri. My mum might be listening to this. I need to fast forward a bunch of that. But season 1 fails the Riz test because Muslims are depicted as terrorists, and then in season 2, the first episode, boom, straight in there, waste no time, Muslims bad guys, and it's like straight in. And this has just been recently released on Amazon Prime, and you do kind of think that it's everywhere. It really is, and so it's and again, that's fiction. So when in the fiction world where anything is possible, where people can fly and have laser beams and have all these powers,
but they can't be good Muslims.
Still can't. Yeah, exactly, right, exactly. A Muslim who just chill is beyond the pale,
Yeah. I remember
very good point.
The first time that kind of hit me was when I watched Patriots Day, another Mal Kohlberg, may Allah bless him, movie, which was obviously it was on the Boston bombings, so like obviously the terrorists were Muslims, there's no doubt about that, we can't deny it, but it's like they went out of their way to have this scene where an FBI agent sat down to interrogate the wife of the terrorist, and she literally gave a sermon about how a Muslim woman should be obedient to her terrorist husband, and Allah is great, and she threw in Arabic words, and the FBI agent doesn't respond. And the FBI agent, so in the scene, she's wearing hijab, the FBI agent, so you think, okay, there's good Muslims and bad Muslims. When the agent walks out of the room, she takes off her hijab, so to show she's not Muslim. And then all the characters, I cannot get this out of my head, they've got this look of shock, and they're either like, what would bring a woman to do that? Silence. There's no answer given. It's just like, and it's like, I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, come on, guys, it's like enough now, like, isn't it? It's getting boring now. Like, stop it. It's not. It's no more. It's not edgy anymore. It's not interesting. It's just kind of boring. And that's what kind of upsets me. And going back to your point on books, Hasnain, I would tell you that the last 3 books that I've read have been very pro-Islam. 40 hadith. Akhlaq in Islam.
Listen, if you want to speak about books, I just finished reading the Secret Divine of Love, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, you always mention that to me when you always wanted to get the author on.
I'm reading How to Pray a Good Prayer by Ali Reza, whatever his name is. Nice. The Quran, come on, it's the best book.
Of course,
that's a great example of great representation. But what I find interesting is that I've just finished literally yesterday watching this show called Utopia from 2013. It's a British show from 2013, and it's on Amazon Prime, and it's really great. It's really, really great. I would strongly recommend you watch it. There's been an American remake with Rainn Wilson from The Office and a few others, and it's really awful, right? But just watch the British version, and what's really interesting about it is that we've all seen Four Lions, right?
Yeah.
And I forgot the name of the character, the guy who does the beard, right?
Oh my god!
That's not Waj.
It's not Waj. I forgot his name, but
yeah. So that guy, the actor is called Adil Akhtar, right? And he plays one of the main protagonists in this show called Utopia, and he's there. He's got his big beard. But his name's Wilson, right? And his character is so brilliant. It really it's nuanced. It's got some really chunky storylines, and he's called Wilson Wilson, and and that's it. Just get on with it. It's a great show. Guy's called Wilson Wilson. I've never met a Muslim called Wilson Wilson, and so he's just got this. He's just this guy with the big beard. Looks, as like a Muslim, right?
Yeah.
but he just plays this incredible role, and it kind of it made me think. It didn't just happen. It did actually just make me think. As in like, will he somehow be shown as a Muslim? He goes, no, it wasn't. It wasn't even a thing. He wasn't even a Muslim in the show. It was just a role that was a great role, acted by a great actor, and I thought that was great. I just really, I think it was worthy of note. But yeah, I think as an aside, forget all the Muslim representation business we're talking about. Just watch Utopia. It's a really great show.
I'll add it to my list. You reminded me of one of Riz Ahmed's recent movies, a Sister's Brother, I want to say it was called. It was a Western, and he again, like he acts in the Western. He's not, outwardly Muslim or anything, but it's just the fact that you're seeing, again, like, it's that representation, right? You're seeing a Pakistani looking fellow in a Western, when usually, Westerns are just kind of like full on white. So really, it's just that representation that really matters. So it's not always necessary to say this character is a Muslim, but just seeing that image kind of imprints on the mind.
It's the same thing with the Sound of Metal. Have you seen?
I haven't seen it yet, but I've seen the trailer. His acting looked insane in that.
Yeah, it's the same thing with that. Like, there's no indication of him being Muslim. He's just literally a drummer, that looks like he has a bunch of tattoos, and he just does his thing. So that's what I want to see where we progress moving forward, where there's no Muslim or Islam involved in the character. You're just playing a character.
Yeah, for sure.
There shouldn't be like, you're Muslim, so we're gonna obviously put you in this role. No, it's just like, the lead role can just be anybody.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. And I remember, just before we wind down with our final question, I remember one of the shows I'm watching and I'm really loving right now. I've got this sci-fi obsession right now. I don't know why, but I'm watching The Expanse. The Expanse, if you guys haven't...
You and Ali.
Ali, are you...
You and Ali, both sci-fi. Ali, this is a huge sci-fi, man.
Ali, are you a sci-fi fan?
I hear what you said. The what?
Are you... The Expanse. Amazon Prime.
Oh, I've seen that.
Expanse.
I've seen
you guys,
recommended.
I don't know. The Expanse. You watch it, right?
It was a language barrier. Yes, I've seen that. Actually.
You love it. You watch it as well. Thank God.
I already watched.
I've been looking for someone to talk about this show with. Ali, you've been quiet this whole time. Oh my God. I've literally seen it twice.
You know what this means, right? This means I'm going to be excluded from the WhatsApp group, and it's going to be you and Ali talking.
We're going to have our own Expanse WhatsApp group now. Anyway, so The Expanse basically is set. Shaf, I'll highly recommend you watch it. It's set far in the future. Humans have colonized Mars and the asteroid belt. They get their materials from the asteroid belt where all the poor people live, which fund Mars, which is a military state, and fund Earth, which is a very rich state. So it's like a, very tense. Everyone's on the brink of war. It's meant to be the most realistic depiction of the future ever depicted on TV. So the physics of it, the space travel is all brilliant. But just watching it, I think it was the last season I was watching, there was one of the characters who works in the asteroid belt. They just decided to show a scene of him praying. Because that far in the future, they do mention like religions, and Ali, remember this scene, right? They do mention.
I was surprised.
Yeah, I was very surprised because they do mention religions and Christianity and Mormonism, and it's all very realistic as to how things would evolve and how people would become. So I remember watching the first 2-3 seasons thinking it's only logical to think that Islam would still exist, that far into the future. And lo and behold, you had a guy in the asteroid belt who they just showed him for like 5-10 seconds praying. I think it was even in zero gravity, which was even cooler.
Yeah. How would you find the Qibla at the asteroid belt?
Well, you just kind of face toward Earth, right? That's the ruling. Come on, Hasnain. Come on.
Yeah,
that's,
right,
that's what you do. No, but just like again, like it's never ever spoken. It's never ever spoken about again. It's never spoken about. He's never referenced as a Muslim. They just chose to throw that scene in there, which I think is very important and very cool, and which is how Muslim representation, I believe, should look. So just like leading on from that into my final question, which is about Muslim representation today. Is Muslim representation really changing? And Shaf, I feel like you got the answers to this. You have the tools, the Riz Test, and you guys have been taking every film that's come out recently to the chop. So tell us, is it really changing, or is it just racism with another face?
So I mean, I was previously going to make a joke about can you get Muslim Pro on Mars, but I thought that's a conversation for another time, right? But then, but with regard to the question, I think I think what we're seeing is, it's not got any better. No, it hasn't, right? There's so much bad representation out there, but within that, we are starting to see nuanced representation, simply because there's the more Muslims are on screen, the more Muslims are spoken about on screen, you're going to get some, just by the law of averages, you're going to get some good representation out there. You're seeing things like Ramy come out with his show, Ramy Youssef, and I thought that was a bit of a watershed moment, because it wasn't, it was just him, his life, it's his very specific experience. He wasn't trying to portray a perfect Muslim, because in the show he's not. He's far from a perfect Muslim. He is an American Egyptian, right, living his life. And a lot of people said that we shouldn't promote that show because it's immoral and he does all these immoral things. But the conversation is also to be had that we don't want every Muslim to be a perfect Muslim on screen. We want it to be a typical representation of Islam. So we're seeing shows like Ramy. We're seeing shows where Muslims are just incidental, as just like I said with The Expanse, and that's definitely on my list now because I've literally just finished Breaking Bad. I know, very
Rewatch.
late.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Oh, not even a rewatch. It's the first
God.
time.
Okay.
So blew me away, loved it, right? So so before I go straight into Better Call Saul, I'll go to The Expanse first. So I think we're even seeing things like Kim's Convenience. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Kim's Convenience.
The name's familiar, but I haven't seen it, no.
Yeah, if you it's on Netflix. It's about these this Korean Canadian convenience store, and it's like a fun family show. Really, each episode is like 25 minutes, and there's a Muslim family in it. There's Muslim characters in it. That there's two sisters that come in. We're wearing the niqab to this shop, and
oh, wow.
and the owner, he's this Canadian Korean guy. He knows their name. He shows off that he knows their names, even though like you can't see like and he gets them wrong, but because he gets the wrong way around. But it's like this representation just like that, right? There's shows that are coming out. TV seems to be pretty good as well. And it's not just like American and the UK. There's a show called Scam, and that's from I'm gonna get this wrong and I'm gonna sound really racist, but I think it's Denmark, but it might be Sweden. It's Scandinavian, right?
Scandinavian.
And yeah, and it's and there's good representation there. So we're seeing lots of bad, but within that we're seeing some good as well that we probably didn't see before. I think that's what the data is telling me, at least.
Ali, what's your perspective? Do you think that Muslim representation in film is changing?
Yes.
As in, based on what you've seen, as in.
Yeah, based on what I've seen, based on what you're mentioning, yeah, of course it's changing. And as we talked about before, that slowly it's going to go that direction, just as it did with all the other races, or I'm saying races, but like all the other, I guess, cultures or backgrounds.
Minorities,
it's going to start happening here.
Yeah. Let's hope so. Hopefully, I think with enough Muslims that are in the industry and promoting change, enough people like you, Shaf, who are really pushing from the other side, hopefully, we will get there. And like I said halfway through the episode, Muslim representation is so important. It's so important to me and so important to those Muslim kids who are growing up who wish they could exist on Tatooine or in the MCU or wherever and really do some good and essentially believe in themselves. So I really think it's important. I want to end with we started the episode with the worst example of Muslim representation in film. What is the most positive example of Muslim representation that you've seen in film? Ali, let's start with you.
I did right now. I knew you were going to say me too. I was like,
you can't think of a single one.
Not even moments.
This is really bad.
Not right now, man.
Wow.
My food delivery is here, and that's what I'm thinking about.
Oh, your food delivery is here. Okay, sorry. Okay. make sure it comes in. Hasnain.
Recently Mosul was really good.
Right. We had an episode on
That's
that.
what we just saw.
Yeah.
I think that Ramy, with all its issues that I have, actually does show pieces of good Muslim representation. Um, I want to say, um, Riz Ahmed's short film, the Night of, that one, as well as the other short film that's on YouTube. The name's been in my head.
The Night of was the series. You mean The Long Goodbye?
The series, yeah. The Night of was a series.
Oh, you're saying The Long
and then-
Goodbye and The Night of. Okay.
Yeah, The Long Goodbye and that. And then there's a lot more good Muslim representation in films you probably haven't heard of because they're in the indie circus. Short films, particularly, are pushing the narrative for that. And I think the strongest push is from short films, like mine. You know.
I mentioned that actually.
Ali,
plug.
Ali, on the edge of your seat. What were you gonna say?
No, that's what I was going to mention. His,
Oh, okay.
the one that he has at the gas station.
Oh, right, yeah. I still haven't seen it. I keep seeing it on your timeline. I will watch it. I promise. Hasnain, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Appreciate
You know, it's sometimes it's your own that never supports you. I get it, man. but no. I like in big box office film, it's harder to think of something, like The Kingdom or Kingdom of Heaven. Sorry.
Oh, Kingdom of Heaven was brilliant.
Kingdom of Heaven. If you want to go back, it was that movie is one of my top movies ever.
Have you seen the director's cut, by the way?
I have not. I know you mentioned it.
So the director's
cut.
Again,
it be your own sometimes.
No, but literally. So you know how you talk about how the Kingdom of Heaven is. I think as a film, it's a great action film. But if you watch the director's cut, it's literally a film about religion. It's every discussion and conversation is about religion and belief in God and Islam and Christianity. It's fantastic. You really should.
I'll put it on the list.
Really
I'll put it on the list. But Kingdom of Heaven, at the end, it just shows you coexistence. It shows you like we're fair people. We're peaceful people.
Yeah.
I think that did a good, and it's unfortunate that I have to think all the way back to Kingdom of Heaven to think of box office Muslim positive representation. But that's the biggest one that comes to my head.
Shaf, what about you?
I think I'm still considering your analysis of my American Sniper being a postmodern critique of American internationalism, right? But I think one example that I always like to give is because I love the show, I love the film, and I wish that more people watch it. Is a film from 1999 called Office Space. And yeah, so not a lot of people don't. Ali, you've seen it, right?
Yeah, it's funny.
Of course, Ali, I've seen it.
Yeah. So it's a great film. I think it was Jennifer Aniston's first big film after Friends.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah, it's just this. It's huge among like the techies because like it's about the tech industry and whatnot. But it's got cult following. When it was released, it did awful, but it's got this cult life. And there's a character in it who's just one of these three kind of like protagonists, and it's Samir. It's Samir. So you got Michael Bolton, you got Samir, and the main guy, I forgot his name. And Samir is just one of this gang of three. It's like a comedy kind of thing. It's like these three, three guys who are just sick of their job and want to make it big, make it rich, and they try to pull off this scam that doesn't quite work. And one of them is Samir, and he's just this, and he's presented as a guy who, he hates his job, he hates his commute, he wishes he had a better life. He's angry at the printer at work, and that kind of stuff. And I thought, it's just so relatable. It spoke to me because I'm that guy at work. I hate my printer. I hate my commute. I work in tech and all that kind of stuff. So it spoke to me. So I use it as an example that I always return to. And it's really short. It's like an hour and 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. But it's not to everyone's taste because I've sat there watching it with a friend. And when you watch a film you love with a friend, you're always just looking at their face, right? And they had like zero expression, thinking, "What is this rubbish you're making me watch?"
The thing is, that is real Muslim representation, right? Because that is our real issues. Our real issues are got to work and the print doesn't work. It's not like, you know, if you were to take Hollywood's portrayal of Muslims into us, you know, we like every day we're struggling with our identity as a Muslim and a British, and you know we're just you know, it's horrible. I don't want to get back into. I'll get into a rant. Shaf, really appreciate you and your time. Before we let you go,
thank you so much.
Tell us, what are your plans for the future of the Riz Test? I know I should have mentioned this earlier. You tweeted a really nice tweet a few months ago. Was it you know that Twitter trend was like, "This is where I was and this is where I am now." I forgot what the
yes,
how it started, how it's going. How it started, well, I think was your first tweet or something, and how it's going was a picture of Riz Ahmed giving the presentation of the Riz Test to academics. So tell us, like, well, firstly, fantastic work, well done. Really proud of your growth. Tell us where you're going from here, and what can you tell us about the future of the Riz Test?
Yeah, so that was really nice of you to say thank you. That we're really, really pleased about that. I think when Riz presented that, it was at the CAA Amplify conference. It was like in front of all these industry bods, and you know, his representation reached out and said, "Look, do you have any information or any data that we can share?" And they can, mate, of course, you know, I've got lots of data. See, I'm using data. Just inclusive
Data.
And so we're really pleased with that. But then, you know, what we're working on now that we're really proud of is this big data project that we've got going, and we're kind of we're standing on the shoulder of giants, really, because there's an academic called Dr. Jack Shaheen who passed away, unfortunately, a number of years ago. He's an American. I don't know if I forgot his background. It might be Egyptian, but I could be wrong. And he did this. He spent his whole life reviewing how Arabs are represented in Hollywood.
Right, I've seen his report. Yeah.
It's, you know, it's the book. He's written a book and called Real Bad Arabs, which adapted into a film as well. And we are kind of taking he's reviewed over 1,000 movies as part of his life's work, and what we've done is I've, you know, with a little bit of help, I've written some, you know, code to kind of take a lot of what he's done and run it through the Riz test, and coupled with all of the crowdsourced reviews that we've had in, which is in the hundreds now over the last 2 years, we've got this really unique database of movies that have been reviewed from like the late 1800s to the present day. And what we're doing is we're working on a report to kind of show our findings from that, and inshallah that will be released in the next as soon as possible, really. But we're talking maybe Q1 of 2021, inshallah. So once we release that, I don't believe a data set similar exists anywhere, and you know, just to kind of just to roll around in the data a little bit, because you've got each movie has 5 criteria: it passes or it fails, right? But with each movie, we're able to pull back because each movie is on IMDb, and if it's on IMDb, I can pull back from IMDb. I think it's something like 70 extra data points from each movie: producer, director, gross, how much it grossed at the box office, actors, production house, all of this data that we can pull back. So if we've got over 1,000 movies times 70 to 80 data points, we've suddenly got a huge data set that we can really pull out some really interesting insights from. And what I want to do, what I'm hoping is that 2021 is where we'll start kind of presenting this data, kind of present, you know, black and white. You can't argue with this picture that we're showing you, and that's what that's what I'm really excited about 2021. At the same time, I want to do some cool things with machine learning and AI, looking at scripts and pulling out word analysis and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that's probably too much for the first quarter of 2021, but that's our ambition, inshallah.
Inshallah, bro.
Inshallah.
I can't wait to see what you do. Keep up the great work. It was wonderful having you on, and inshallah, hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Take care,
really enjoyed it.
Take care. Assalamu alaikum.